Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 5090 O-level biology. This is the June 22 paper 2-1, which I'm going to try and explain to you and make it easier for you to handle this paper in the coming exams. Now, as you all know, this paper is for 1 hour and 45 minutes, and this will stay 1 hour and 45 minutes. But the only thing different is that there'll be no section B and no section C. So there's only going to be one section, and that is all. So that is what I've discussed in the specimen paper as well. So there will be no section B and C, so there won't be any essay questions. Now let's look at this because this is for the year 2022, where the syllabus change for 2023. So you will be the first group of students who will be taking the 2023 exam for the new syllabus. Now let's look at the question, section A. Write your answer in the spaces provided. The diagram shows the human skin. Look at it very carefully, and then you just scroll upwards and you see identify the parts labeled B and C. Now, what was B? Now, when you look at B, what is B? You see, this, of course, you can see is the sweat gland. This is the sweat duct. It's coming to the surface. But then when you look at these, what are these? Now, this was a little difficult, I think. For some students, it will probably be a little difficult. So, identify the parts labeled B and C. So, this is B and C. Now, B could be anything. You could have said blood vessel, and capillary, artery, arteriole. Even capillary was allowed, though I don't agree with it. It doesn't make sense. And C was the sweat gland. So this was the sweat gland. So C was the sweat gland. And so just labeling it got you your 2 marks. You just have to label it. Describe how part B is involved in maintaining a constant body temperature when the external temperature drops. So you enter this room is very hot. Sorry, this room is very cold. What is going to happen in your blood vessels? So B was a blood vessel, but it depended. If you got B wrong, then of course you'd get this part of the question wrong as well. So there'll be less blood flowing in the blood vessel, which is close to the skin surface. That's why when you come out on a very cold day, you look very pale in the face because all the blood is diverted from the skin blood vessels to the deeper parts of the body. So there's decrease in radiation or heat loss. So how part B is involved in maintaining a constant body temperature when the external temperature drops. So just imagine you're in a very cold room. How is your skin blood vessels going to react? They're going to be less blood in them. Decrease in the heat loss. So what is this called? This is called vasoconstriction. Well, if you wrote vasoconstriction, or if you said blood vessels or arteries or arterioles, they become narrow or they become constricted. So you had to really explain all that. If you knew all that, I'm sure you would have got your 3 out of 3 because this wasn't something very difficult. It was just vasoconstriction. Or even if you didn't write vasoconstriction and you described it, well, I would have given you your 3 marks. Now, when you look at the mark scheme, it says less blood flow in the blood vessels close to the skin surface, so decrease in radiation or heat loss. And you said vasoconstriction. Please remember only arteries and arterioles can constrict. It's not the veins or it's not the capillaries which can vasoconstrict. The reason being is that there's no muscle layer in the capillaries and there's no muscle layer in the veins either. So it's only muscles are only present in the arteries and the arterioles, and those muscles when they contract, that is called vasoconstriction. Here's a diagram for you all to see the structure of the arteries and the veins. So basically the only thing which is common in all three is the endothelium. This endothelium is common in every, and in the capillaries there's only the endothelial which is left. The rest all is gone. The tunica media is the one which contains the muscle layer. So the muscles in the wall of the artery. So these are the muscles in the wall of the arteries. These are the muscles in the wall of the arteries and they can contract or relax. So that is called vasoconstriction or vasodilation. Similarly, in the veins cannot vasoconstrict, neither the veins, neither the capillaries. They cannot vasoconstrict either because the capillaries have nothing in them. They have no muscle in the wall of the capillaries. The muscles are only present in the arteries. So is this artery, this is an artery, and this is an arteriole. So arteries or arteriole, there are three types of arteries actually: elastic artery, muscular artery, and arteriole. So just a quick recap of all what we have done before, but I just want you to revise it. Then coming to the B part of the question, part A is unevenly distributed in the human skin. Name part A and suggest reasons for this uneven distribution. Now what was part A? Part A is a receptor. Let's look at part A. Yeah, this is part A. It's a receptor. The receptors can be for anything. They can be for touch, they can be for pressure, they can be for pain, they can be for temperature. So it is either, you can say, a receptor or a nerve ending. And why? Because they have an uneven distribution. Some parts of the body are very sensitive. Like for instance, you're standing under the shower and you suddenly it's hot, suddenly it's very cold water. When you turn your back to it, or your front is more sensitive. Similarly, your hand, the back of your hand is more sensitive as the lower part of your hand, where you catch hold your pen. So there's uneven distribution, and examples of uneven distribution: high density in the fingers and in the lips, and exposed area we need higher sensitivity. So the main reason why is because, you see, when you are exposed to different environmental stresses, your parts of the body which are sensitive should be able to pick that up and then of course take remedial measures. You can see that there are 4 mark scheme points, but it's a 3 marks question. So any three out of these four. So A is a receptor, nerve ending. What does it receive? What does it sort of perceive? Touch, pressure, pain, or temperature. Even if you wrote one of them, I'm not saying you write all of them. When I put a slash here, you have to understand it means either you wrote this or you wrote this. Both of them would be correct. Or you wrote this or you wrote this. All will be correct. And then they unevenly distributed, high density in the fingers. Why? Because you have to touch things, so we've got to have high density there. And other parts of the body which are exposed, of course, the face is very high sensitivity as well. So that would be that part. And then coming to the C part, the thickness of layer D can change over several months. Suggest and explain one reason for a decrease in the thickness. Now, what was D? Let's look at that. Now, D was what? It was the fat or the adipose tissue. So this D is the fat or the adipose tissue, right? Adipose tissue or the fat tissue. Some of you who have more layers of that, so you are obese. And some of you, of course, don't have any very thickness of it. So body, so any tool, so you have to suggest one reason for a decrease in the thickness. So fatty tissue or adipose tissue got you 1 mark, because what did you name? You gave me suggestions for one reason for the decrease in the thickness. So you said, what was it, fatty tissue or adipose tissue? So if you eat less food, now if you eat less food, you're less fat in the diet, or you exercise a lot, so this fat is going to be used by the body for respiration and releasing energy. So body using more energy than it is taking in. Like for instance, if you are fasting, you're fasting the whole day, you've not eaten anything. So then, of course, the fatty reserves are going to be used up to provide the energy by the process of respiration. So the fat is going to be converted to glucose, and then the glucose is going to be respired in some form or the other. Of course, in A levels, I would teach it to you differently. But in O levels, it's fine if I say the fat is converted to glucose and the glucose is respired and energy released. So let's look at the wordings. Fatty tissue, adipose tissue, 1 mark. Less food eaten, or the person is exercising more. So the fat is being used for respiration. And please understand, respiration, R-E, release energy. You write, most often students write produce energy. Now that is very wrong. It's wrong biological English. You don't write produce energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. That's the law of thermodynamics. And the fourth point was, so there are 4 mark scheme points. 1, 2, 3. Fourth point was body using more energy than it is taking in. So of course the fat reserves will be used up. So that is the question. How it says, suggest and explain one reason for the decrease in the thickness of this fat layer. Now let's read through question number 2. A man decides to do some fitness training to improve his ability to provide oxygen to his muscles. Describe the route an oxygen molecule takes from the atmosphere to reach the muscles. So from the atmosphere, first we have to talk about it in the lungs. What is happening in the lungs? In the lungs, it enters through the nose or the nasal passages, then it enters the larynx and then the trachea. Then it travels through the bronchus and the bronchioles, and then it reaches the alveoli. So inside the lung, it reaches the alveoli. Now in the alveoli, now it has diffused into the blood or into the capillaries lining the alveoli. And then the blood is going to carry it to the muscles. And how is it going to carry it to the muscles? The oxygen is going to be bound to hemoglobin. So it must be inside the red blood cells. And then it will be transported by the pulmonary vein, which connects the lung with the, so this would be the pulmonary vein, which carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium. And then it is transported, pumped by the heart. So the heart will pump it, and then it will enter the arteries, the aorta, and from the aorta, the arteries arise to the muscles, and it will go to the muscle. So describe the route an oxygen molecule takes from the atmosphere to reach the muscles. And there's 4 marks. So that's a lot of points that you have to give me for that. As you can see, there are 8 mark scheme points, which tells you that any 4 of these you gave me and you got your 4 out of 4. So the fact that the route of an oxygen molecule taken from the atmosphere, so atmosphere you have to start with the lungs. The lungs, how is it going to enter the lungs? Nose, larynx, trachea, 1 mark. Bronchus or bronchioles, 2nd mark. To the alveoli, 3rd mark. So you could get all that in one sentence, is that the air, the oxygen inside the air enters the nose, through the nose, enters the trachea, then divides into the bronchus, and then finally ends up in the alveoli. And you got your 3 marks. Here it diffuses into the blood inside the capillaries, and then it is taken to the muscles. Red blood cells contain hemoglobin. The oxygen binds to the hemoglobin and it forms oxyhemoglobin. Then the pulmonary vein is going to carry it to the heart. What is going to happen in the heart? The heart is going to pump this blood, and then it is going to reach the muscles through the arteries or the arterioles, which are going to be reaching the muscles. Now coming to part 2, the fitness training is designed to result in changes to the man's body. Suggest 2 body changes that would improve his ability to provide oxygen to his muscles. A larger lung capacity, stronger intercostal muscles, stronger cardiac muscles. Cardiac muscles are able to pump more blood in each cardiac cycle, improved blood supply to the heart muscles, and more hemoglobin. So more hemoglobin means more, maybe more red blood cells. So this is what you have to write for the fitness training to change in the man's body. So suggest 2 body changes that would improve the ability to provide oxygen to his muscles. So you can see there are 5, 1, 2, 3, 5 points. Larger lung capacity, stronger cardiac muscle, more hemoglobin, improved blood supply to heart muscle, cardiac muscle able to pump more blood in each cardiac cycle. Basically, you see, you had to see is 2 body changes that would improve the ability to provide oxygen to the muscles. So, providing oxygen means the heart beating more forcefully. The heart beating more forcefully or more number of times per unit time. Heart beats 70 to 80 times per minute. So the effective main thing is the more effective the circulation, the more oxygen will be reaching the muscles. Now coming to the B part of the question, the man measures how much oxygen his body uses, his oxygen consumption at different intensities of exercises from rest to high intensity. His results are shown in the graph. Now always look at a graph very carefully. Now on the y-axis you have oxygen consumption in dm cube per minute, and here you have exercise intensity, you have rest. So this would be the oxygen consumption dm cube per minute. Then as the intensity increases, this is the high intensity, it goes up to 3.4. What is 3.4 dm cube per minute? So we see how that is. It is goes up from, just let's look at from here. It goes up from 0. So it's half of 0.5. 0.25, and then it goes up to 0.5, then 0.751, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and so on and so forth. So you look at this very carefully, state the name of the chemical process that uses oxygen to release energy. Now again, this is a very easy one, but you got it wrong most of the time in the muscles. And this for 2 marks, and that gives you a clue because there are two words, aerobic respiration. And as I always tell you in my videos as well, respiration is RE respiration, RE release energy. So aerobic respiration got you 2 marks. So the one aerobic is 1 mark. So if you just wrote respiration, you'll get 1 mark. But if you wrote aerobic respiration, you get 2 marks. Then it says use the graph to determine the maximum volume of oxygen. I've just mentioned that. That's 3.4. So maximum volume of oxygen the man consumes in 1 minute is 3.4 dm cube. If you didn't write the units, well, you didn't get a mark for that. So 1 mark for writing 3.4 dm cube. Then coming to part 3, the graph shows that it is possible for the man to increase the intensity of his exercise beyond the point at which he has reached his maximum oxygen consumption. He can only do this for a short period of time. Now explain why. Well, why? Why does it? Because he's going to start respiring anaerobically without oxygen. But that will release some energy, but that is going to result in the formation of lactic acid. And lactic acid, when it builds up in the muscles, of course, you start to cramp and you have to stop exercising. So for the 3 marks that they've asked you, you have to talk about anaerobic respiration. You have to talk about the anaerobic part and the production of lactic acid and the lactic acid buildup in the muscles causing fatigue or cramps. So respire anaerobically, lack of oxygen, energy released by respiration, and lactic acid causes cramps or pain in the muscles and you have to stop exercising. After 4 weeks of fitness training, the man measures his oxygen consumption again. On the graph, sketch a line to show the expected results of successful fitness training. So for successful fitness training means increase the intensity of the exercise, reaches the maximum. So somehow we're going to increase the fitness training and you've got to get that from the question. So on the graph, you have a line which starts close to the rest point line on y-axis and continues upwards on the same straight line as before the training. And then the maximum oxygen consumption is higher and reaches at a higher exercise intensity. So it sort of plateaus off a little higher. This is the point where it should, any point a little above this, it should have plateaued. Or even it could have been straight if you had drawn it straight, even if that was correct. So this would get you your 2 marks. First mark was for the line starting close to the rest point on the x-axis, and then of course continuing upwards on the same straight line as before training. And then it should of course have the maximum oxygen consumption should be higher and reached at a higher exercise intensity. So higher exercise intensity means then that should have been at this, not this point, but a little ahead of this. So it's going to start peaking here, plateauing here, sorry. So that completes this question. Now coming to question number 3, this is a little challenging, this question. Some of you do not like the plant part of biology. I know that. I don't know why. I think maybe we don't teach it so well, so you all don't like it either. A gardener grows a species of dahlia flowering plant. Each year, the gardener chooses his best plants and takes cuttings to make new plants. Shoots are cut, cuttings and their lower leaves removed. The cut ends are placed in well-watered soil and covered by a transparent plastic bag. That's how they're showing it to you. The cut ends grow roots and the cuttings develop into new plants. Removing the lower leaves and placing the cuttings in a transparent bag helps prevent them wilting until the roots develop. Suggest and explain how these steps help to prevent wilting. So, why was the removal of the lower leaves? How did that help? Now, it's very easy. You see, removing leaves means what? Leaves contain stomata. So if you're reducing the surface area or you're reducing the stomata, well, there's going to be no stomata, so no transpiration, no water loss. And then you're covering it with a transparent bag, so that is going to increase the humidity. So all the water vapor that evaporates will just collect around the plant. So this is the plant and you've covered it up with a plastic bag. So all the water evaporating will collect inside the plastic bag and this will make it all very humid. And more the humidity means there'll be less transpiration or less evaporation or less water loss. So that was the function of the two things, and this was for 3 marks. Then taking cuttings is a commercial application of asexual reproduction. Define asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is what? Production of genetically identical offsprings, or what do we say? We call that clones. And how do we produce this? Is only by mitosis, just cells division. There's no meiosis, and only one parent is involved. So you just take the cells in asexual reproduction, you just take a cutting, you take a stem or a leaf or even a part of a root, and you just grow it, and you just provided the right soil and everything, and you just provided the right temperature and water, and it is going to divide by mitosis and it's going to grow. So there's going to be no sexual reproduction, there's going to be no gametes, no seeds, no flowers. Now, just to give you a little idea of the actual wording, reduction in surface area or reduction in the number of stomata, and covering with a transparent would be increased humidity, so to reduce transpiration, or you can say evaporation or water loss. So 1 mark there, 1 mark here, and 1 mark here. Then taking cuttings, commercial application, define asexual reproduction, production of genetically identical offsprings, mitosis, and one parent. B part of the question, the stems of the dahlia cuttings contain xylem vessels. Describe two functions of xylem vessels in young stems of dahlia, and for each function explain one way in which the xylem structure is adapted for their function. So the function is xylem vessels transport water and minerals, or water and ions. Adaptation, they are long, thin, there are no end walls, and they are hollow tubes, and there's no cytoplasm in them. The other function is mechanical support, which keeps the stem upright, and this would be the function 2. And how does it do that? Is that it has lignified, woody or straightened, hard walls, which of course give it a whole lot of strength and supporting the whole stem. So function 2 would be mechanical support, or you can say keeps the stem upright. So transport water and minerals, long hollow tubes, support, keeps the stem upright, and the reason why they do it is the lignified walls, which give it strength, and that of course helps it to give the support to the plant. Part C of the question, the gardener's dahlia cuttings grow into full-size plants with flowers. The gardener decides that he would like to produce a plant that contains the disease-resistant characteristic of one of these plants with the red petal color of another. With reference to named parts of the flower, describe how he could achieve this. Now, it's very simple. This is called artificial selection, or it is called selective breeding. Then what is he going to do? He's going to transfer the pollen from the anther to the stigma. So anther, he's going to take the pollen from the anther of a plant which has red petals to the stigma of another. And then he's going to wait for fertilization and the gamete formation. And ultimately, he's going to wait for the seeds to grow. And then he's going to put the seeds in the ground and let them germinate. And then he's going to select the ones with the best combination of characteristics. So this is for 5 marks, and we have quite a few mark scheme points. We have in fact 7 mark scheme points, and any 5 of those would get you your 5 marks. So artificial selection, if you knew it, fine. If you didn't write that, you can even still get 5 marks. We would transfer the pollen from the anther of the red color plant, and then we'd transfer to the stigma of another, and we'd wait for the fertilization to take place, and then we'd wait for the seeds to form, and then we would grow the seeds, and we'd plant the seeds in the soil, and we'd select the ones with the best combination of characteristics. And we would do this repeatedly, and finally we would get the desired plant with the desired characteristics. Question 4. The human liver contains a high concentration of enzymes called transaminases. These enzymes are important for the metabolism of amino acids. Amino acids are absorbed from the alimentary canal and carried to the liver by a blood vessel. Name the part of the alimentary canal where absorption occurs in the blood vessel that carries the amino acids to the liver. That's very easy. There's absorbed is in the ileum, or you can say the small intestine. Even that was correct. If you said small intestine or the ileum, both were correct. Right, then the name of the blood vessel is the hepatic portal vein. I'm sure everybody knows that. That's a very common one. We talk about it a lot. There are different types of transaminases. Each type has a specific active site. Explain why this means that each type catalyzes a specific reaction. Now that's for 3 marks. Why? Because lock and key, shape of the active site, complementary, binds to the substrate, forming the enzyme substrate complex, and a wrongly shaped substrate cannot fit a certain active site. So the active site, the shape of the active site determines the shape of the substrate, which is always complementary to the active site. So just a quick look at this lock and key hypothesis. The shape of the active site is always complementary. Then when the substrate attaches, it forms the enzyme substrate complex. A wrongly shaped substrate cannot fit into the active site. So out of 5, any 3 would have got you your 3 out of 3. Now the last question, question number 5. A plant species lives in ponds. The diagram shows the whole plant in a section through one of the leaves. Now you can see there's a soil and then there's a pond water, and then you can see the leaves float on the surface of the water, and then they've shown you a section through the leaf. So the same leaf here, they've shown you a diagrammatic slide of it, and they've shown you the microscopic picture of it. The leaves are adapted to float on the surface of the water. Now, it's a very important thing. So just one advantage of the plant of the leaves floating on the surface of the water. So on the surface of the water, why is it feasible? It's more feasible because there'll be more light available for it to be absorbed, and there'll be more carbon dioxide diffusing in from the air. And name the parts of the leaf labeled A and B. Now what is A? A is the stoma, and B is the airspace. Then with reference to parts A and B, describe and explain how the structure of the leaf is adapted to a pond environment, which is 3 marks. So stomata are on the upper surface, so there's a gaseous exchange, the air can enter in the leaves, then the carbon dioxide, and that will be available for photosynthesis. Then large air spaces, so the air spaces make the leaf buoyant or make it easy to float, so it's less dense. The plant is part of a food web in a pond. State its trophic level. Any plant, what will be its trophic level? It is the first trophic level, or you can say it's the producer. So state its trophic level would be the first trophic level, or you can even say producer, that would be fine. So first trophic level. All plants are a first trophic level, and they're also called producers. So that would have got you your 1 mark. So let's word it. Suggest one advantage of the leaf floating on the surface, more light and carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. Name the parts labeled A and B, stoma and airspace. And with reference to A and B, then explain. So stomata on the upper surface. So air enters the leaf. What does air contain? Air contains carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is needed for photosynthesis. Large air spaces, which makes the leaf float. So the leaf doesn't sink into the water. It just keeps on floating on the surface of the water. So it's less dense, or you say can make it buoyant or buoyancy. And the plant is part of the food web, so trophic level is the first trophic level. Okay, that finishes this paper, and we don't have to do the next part, which is section B, which has been removed from the syllabus, which we are going to be examined in 2023. So you'll have 15 marks of similar questions, which of course makes this exam a little difficult. So you need to practice these questions more and get a good understanding of these questions. So best of luck, and thank you very much.